Japan is gone, not underwater, not conquered, broken into 3 countries. That's not history, it's an anime. A hit one streaming right now. And its hero is a small-town clerk who decides he is going to put the country back together. His name is Misumi. No magic bloodline. No giant robot. His weapons are maps, policy, and the nerve of a man who thinks a meeting can end a civil war. This is Nippon Sangoku, Japan's 3 kingdoms. And here's what nobody tells you about that title. 3 Kingdoms isn't fantasy. It's arguably the most retold true story on the planet. 1800 years ago, China's empire shatters. 3 warlords tear the country apart, and every one of them is certain he's the one destined to make it whole again. That war became a novel, one of the 4 great classics of Chinese literature, and it never stopped being remade. 100-episode television epics, blockbuster films, video games that have sold tens of millions, pouring out across China, Korea, and Japan, right up to today. Think Game of Thrones, except it actually happened, and half the planet has spent 18 centuries refusing to let it end. So when this anime's creator went looking for a story, he didn't invent one. He read those 3 kingdoms histories and decided to run the whole thing again in the ruins of a future Japan. So tonight has 2 layers, and I'll always tell you which one we're standing in. The anime, invented, and the real history underneath it. First Chinese, later Korean. Here's the trap. Line up 3 modern neighbours, China, Korea, Japan, and it's tempting to say, look, another 3 kingdoms. Tonight I'm going to show you why that comparison is half true and half a lie, and why the lie is the interesting part. You don't need to memorize dynasties or names. Keep one question. When a broken map becomes one colour, who gets to call that peace? And who had to disappear to make it look clean? One real inheritance. One false comparison. One story these neighbours cannot stop retelling. In the anime, the story starts in our future. Nuclear war and collapse wreck modern civilization. 3 new countries claw their way up out of the ruins of Japan. Misumi starts nowhere near power. He is a minor farming official living quietly with his wife Saki. Together they make a small private promise, build a peaceful country. Then she dies. The promise does not die with her. It grows until it is swallowing the whole map. He will reunify Japan. But Misumi's gift is not that he is the strongest man in the room. It is that he reads the room. He sees what land can grow, what an official secretly wants, which institution is rotting, and where a single speech can do what an army cannot. That makes his goal sound kind, it also makes it dangerous. Reunify Japan sounds like healing when you hear it as a promise to a dead wife. To the people in the other 2 countries, the same words can sound like one thing: surrender. Plant one name now. The creator has said he modelled Misumi partly on a real Chinese general, a brilliant one named Deng Ai, who helped destroy a kingdom readers had spent centuries loving. Hold that name lightly. Deng Ai is the conqueror hidden inside the gentle clerk, and we will come back for him. The hero begins inside a contradiction. To see it, we need the real board he inherited, China's. Now the real history, China, about 1800 years ago. China's Han Dynasty, the single empire that had held everything together for 400 years, was coming apart in rebellion and warlords. Out of that wreck, 3 powers hardened. You only need these three, and I'll give each one a handle. Wei, the strongest in the north, run by a warlord named Cao Cao. Powerful, brilliant, and cast as the villain. Shu, the underdog in the southwest, the one later storytellers fall hopelessly in love with. Wu, the holdout in the southeast. Wei, Shu, Wu. Strong, beloved, stubborn. That is the whole cast. Why 3? 2 sides is a duel. 4 starts to feel like homework, but 3 is unstable on purpose. 2 can gang up on 1. The weakest can decide who wins, and every victory reshuffles the board. Nobody is ever safe, and everybody can tell themselves history is just waiting for them to finish the map. That is the fantasy Misumi steps into. He is not wearing an ancient costume. He is stepping into a machine that makes reunite everything feel like the natural last page. It is also why 3 modern neighbors, China, Korea, Japan, look like the same shape. 3 powers, shifting alliances, no permanent trust. Tempting. But tempting is not true. We are going to break that comparison before it breaks the history. First, how a few dry lines in an old record became a story worth remaking for 1800 years. Quick jump back to the anime. In episode 3, Misumi takes a job exam with one absurd rule. Make a hardened border general drop to one knee. Another candidate can try force. Misumi tries thought. The knee is a scoreboard. He drops or he doesn't. It turns political cleverness into something you can watch like a fight. This world worships the person who finds the route nobody else can see. But that taste for clever strategy did not fall out of a tidy ancient script. It was built. Now the real record. The Chinese history does not tell the war like a movie. It files it away as separate biographies. This ruler, that general, scattered across dozens of lives. Take the war's most famous battle, Red Cliffs, where Cao Cao's Wei, the northern power, was stopped from swallowing the south. In Cao Cao's own official biography, that catastrophic defeat gets a shrug. He goes to Red Cliffs, he fights, he loses. There is disease he leaves. No music. No genius quietly reading the wind. Then, centuries later, a novel, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, takes that shrug and blows it into legend. Fireships, fog, a strategist outthinking an army 10 times his size. Not every detail is true, but it made the event usable. It answered the question the dry record never could. How do you stop the man who is supposed to win? The record asks what a person did. The novel asks what kind of person he was, and whether you should love him. That novel, a moral blockbuster, not a dusty file, is what will one day land in the anime creator's hands, and it comes with a favourite. History does not let the favourite win. So what does the anime inherit from that novel? An ending audiences have been arguing about for 600 years. The novel pours its whole heart onto Shu, the underdog, heroes forever, one disaster from being wiped out. Cao Cao's Wei is strong, funny, terrifying, and cast as the wall they keep crashing into. It works because the story splits 2 things apart: who deserves to win and who actually can. Then history plays its cruelest trick. The beloved underdog, Shu, falls. Cao Cao's Wei wins, but not for long. A powerful family inside it quietly seizes control and renames the whole thing a new dynasty. Jin, the latecomer that steals the ending. Jin swallows the last holdout, Wu, and closes the map. China is one again, just not under any of the three leaders the audience followed for the entire story. They are dead. Their kingdoms are gone. A family that showed up late walks off with a trophy. The political question closes. Jin wins. But the moral question refuses to die. Who should have won? Do any virtues survive losing? And is reunify the same as at peace? Or is it just the moment one winner gets strong enough to rebrand conquest as order? That unanswered question matters more to the anime than any three-color map. Because Misumi's mission sounds noble, we met Saki's promise before we met the armies it would take. But reunify Japan still hides a threat. Peace offered to whom? And who is going to feel it as defeat? Japan did not get that tension straight from an ancient archive. It got it through the longest game of telephone in East Asia. In Japan, novels, manga, and TV had already made China's enormous cast familiar. Then a game company, Koei, did something bolder. It handed you the map. Now you are not just asking who deserved to win, you can make them win. Pick the doomed side, recruit the officer history threw away, and refight the battle that has frustrated readers for centuries. For a moment, justice looks like control of the map. Then you notice your beloved underdog starts behaving exactly like an empire the second you hand it enough land. Virtue becomes a difficulty setting. History becomes replayable. And for a lot of people alive today, this is where they meet the three kingdoms for the very first time. Not in an ancient record, but in a video game built on a novel built on that record. Back in the anime, after Saki's death, Misumi does not inherit a crown. He travels to Osaka, yes, real Japan Osaka. The anime keeps the map familiar, to apply for a job under a border general. The future unifier of Japan walks in as a job applicant. A prince can claim destiny. An applicant has to prove he is useful. Mizumi's first victory is not land. It is getting into the room where land gets decided. Now that name I asked you to hold, Deng Ai, the general Misumi is built from. The real Deng Ai served Cao Cao's way. In the year 263, he marched an army over a mountain route everyone said was impossible, and forced the beloved underdog kingdom, Shu, to surrender. He was the man who finally killed the fan favorite. His reward, accusation, and death before the new regime could be bothered to protect him. Brilliant, useful, dangerous, disposable. So the creator did not just move a hero from China to Japan, he took the uncomfortable winner, the one who beat the team you love, and asked a harder question. Could intelligence and persuasion carry that same man without the bloodshed? There is the direct chain, one culture's story handing itself down its own bloodline. Chinese war, Chinese record, Chinese novel, Japanese game, Japanese anime. Now the false comparison. Korea also had a three kingdoms, and it does not belong anywhere on that chain. Its whole value is that it does not fit. New country, still real history, Korea, in roughly the same ancient era. Korea has its own famous Three Kingdoms age. Here is the catch nobody puts in the title. It actually had 4 big powers, not 3. You only need 2 of their names, the winner, Silla, and the one that got erased, Gaia. The other 2 are just 2 more kingdoms. Don't bother memorizing them. Gaia was not a tidy single kingdom. It was a league of smaller states, but it was a real power. So 4 powers on the ground, 1 famous title that only remembers 3. Why did the 4th vanish from the name? Partly because Gaia left behind no history written in its own voice to fight for it. Centuries later, a royal Korean history organized the entire past around the 3 kingdoms, whose records and heirs carried more weight, and it was titled, flatly, History of the Three Kingdoms. That does not make it a lie. It shows the price of every frame. The people writing it were rescuing a lost world with whatever scraps survived. But leaving something out can make it look like it never mattered at all. Picture a history of Misumi's Japan written after he wins. Every rival he beat would start to look like clutter on the road to a happy ending. The winner rewrites the beginning. That is how a winner starts to look inevitable. Scylla was not inevitable. It needed an empire's help. Back to the anime. 3 years after that strange job exam, Misumi is inside the machinery of power. His state sends a neighboring one a flat demand: surrender, unconditionally. From the sender's side, it is brutally efficient. Obey and maybe nobody has to die. From the receiving side, peace begins with the death of their independence. Accept, and the winner calls it voluntary. Refuse, and the winner calls you the obstacle to peace. The language gets cleaned up long before the map does. That is the anime turning our one question into policy. Can a peaceful era begin with an order that leaves the other side no real choice? Now the real Korean version of the exact same trap. Silla could not beat its two bigger rivals alone. So it allied with the superpower of the age, China's Tang Empire. Together they crushed one rival, then the other. On a clean map, happy ending. 3 kingdoms become one. Except Silla and its Tang ally could not agree on who owned the piece they had just built. So Silla turned and fought the very empire that had handed it victory, and the kingdom they had destroyed did not fully die. Its survivors rose again as a brand new state, just to the north. So what did Silla actually unify? Depends which map you trust, and when you stop the clock, because the map kept moving long after the happy ending. This is not a template for modern Korea and China. What survives is smaller and more human. The neighbor you cannot ignore may also be the neighbor you cannot fully trust. 3 different endings: Jin's China, Silla's Korea, Misumi's Japan, and each one leaves the same wound. A winner drew the final border, and someone on the other side never agreed to it. Stay in Korea, but now watch Korea reach across the border and take China's story for itself. This is the single cleanest proof of the whole point. Remember, Korea's own ancient kingdoms had nothing to do with China's 3 kingdoms, but centuries later, Koreans imported that Chinese epic anyway and quietly rebuilt it into something Korean. Here's how far it went. After Japan's devastating invasions of Korea in the 1590s, Koreans started building shrines to a character from the Chinese novel, the General Guan Yu. A Chinese warlord became a Korean protector, even a Korean god of wealth. Scenes from the Chinese novel got repainted onto Korean folding screens and hung in Korean homes. That is not a story crossing a border untouched. It is a new audience deciding what the old hero is for. And that split is still alive today. People can adore a neighbor's culture while distrusting its government or resenting its history. Which is why who copied whom is usually the dullest question in the room. Korea took a Chinese general and built a shrine. Japan took a Chinese conqueror and built a gentle clerk who wants to save the future. Same source, completely different wishes. And the anime refuses to let all this cleverness stay clean. By the final episode, one of Misumi's allies persuades the emperor himself, and an imperial order rolls toward the enemy. Words reach the very top, and the war still enters its last, worst phase. Persuasion may be kinder than combat, but it is never outside power. An imperial order is just language with an army standing behind it. Misumi's gift does not lift him out of the machine. It makes him frighteningly good at running it. Now Deng Ai pays off. Remember him, a brilliant general who could barely get a sentence out, and who was thrown away the moment he had won. The creator keeps Deng Ai's map reading genius and deletes his silence, turning the near-mute soldier into a clerk whose words can move an emperor. The army sneaking over the mountains becomes an argument moving through an institution. The winner nobody liked becomes the hero you are quietly rooting for, and his motive is no longer an emperor's command, it is a promise to Saki. That is the whole trick in one line, the same brilliant mind aimed at a different hope. And it exposes the real answer, sitting under all three maps. Three Kingdoms is not a law of history. It is a machine for making loss feel unfinished, because with 3 players, every defeat could have gone another way. Every losing side stays a might have been, and every later audience can reopen the board and give its favourite one more run. So line them up. China, a real war that hardened into a moral epic. Korea, a separate real history whose famous title quietly dropped a 4th power. Japan, a modern invention, openly built from China's version. As family history, the resemblance is fake. As a moral question, it is dead real. Who gets to call conquest repair? Now the dangerous part, the 3 modern neighbours make that question live again. They are not ancient kingdoms. They are countries close enough to share pop culture and memory, and different enough to fight over both. The anime itself is proof of the closeness. A Japanese creator loved a Chinese political story enough to rebuild his own country inside it. But closeness and trust are not the same thing. In a 2024 joint poll, roughly 9 in 10 people in China and Japan said they viewed the other country unfavorably. Korea's feelings split differently. Many distrust China while still calling the relationship important. Many like Japan personally, even as unresolved colonial history drives the anger. These are snapshots, not personalities. One person can love a neighbour's food, reject its government, need its market, and still carry a real historical grievance, all at once. That is Misumi's problem, blown up past any one anime. The same act feels like repair from the centre, and like a boot on the neck from the receiving end. Which is why, do they love each other or hate each other, is the wrong question. It is both on purpose. So what happens when neighbours this tangled inherit the same story? Because borrowing curdles into a fight over ownership. A character, a word, a memory crosses a border. One side sees a tribute, the other sees a theft, and both demand the credit. The 3 Kingdoms story makes that fight unusually easy to see. A Chinese war stays recognizably Chinese even as a Japanese game changes how millions first meet it. A Korean shrine can make a Chinese general locally sacred without turning Korea's own past into China's. Borrowing does not erase where something came from, and where it came from does not control everything it will ever mean. That is what makes the 3 neighbours, another 3 Kingdoms line so seductive. 3 powers, no lasting trust, endless fighting over whose version wins. But as an actual model of politics, it breaks. There is no single throne to capture. No last emperor who can rule on who owns the past century, or what shared culture is allowed to mean. The modern fight is over whose version becomes common sense, with nobody, anywhere, who can ever call it settled. break the comparison, and we get to keep the warning without pretending history literally repeats. So, China's three kingdoms became a real history, then a moral epic. Korea's ancient world was never just three clean powers, ask Gaia, and Nippon Sangoku is modern fiction that knows exactly which Chinese story it is built from. The tidy comparison fails. Good. Now we can finally see what is left standing. Not a prediction that three modern countries will refight an ancient war. A warning about the stories people tell when they want power to look like repair. Every version turns chaos into a few unforgettable claimants and dangles reunification as the happy ending, and every ending leaves someone off the map. The beloved loser wins centuries of affection. The fourth power vanishes from the title. The conqueror wins a kingdom and loses his own ending. Misumi inherits that conqueror's maps, but not his silence. He begins with a promise to Saki, and the promise is what makes the map matter. The broken comparison is what forces the real question: what will keeping that promise cost? And who will be told to call that cost peace? The record closes. The story crosses the sea. Three Kingdoms was never one history repeating. It is three neighbors refusing to let the same story mean the same thing.